I never thought I'd return. Not really. Not after everything they did. But there I was, 32 years old, standing under golden chandeliers in a ballroom so opulent it looked like it had been ripped straight from a movie. Tuxedos, string quartets, caviar on porcelain spoons. And me, Nathan Cole, the family failure. The forgotten one. Before we get into the sweet part, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you're watching us for the first time, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification so you never miss any new story. 9 years ago, they threw me out like garbage. Now I was standing just a few steps away from them, watching as their smug little world teetered on the edge of collapse. But before we talk about poetic justice, and trust me, it's good, let me take you back. I was 17 the day my life changed. Not in some inspiring Hollywood breakthrough kind of way. No, that day. I learned what it truly meant to be unwanted. I had just gotten home from school, buzzing with excitement. 3 college acceptance letters were tucked into my backpack. Real schools too. Westfield University had even offered me a partial academic scholarship. I couldn't believe it. I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe they'll finally see me. I laid the letters out on the dining room table like sacred artifacts. My parents were sitting there sipping wine, watching some political commentary show like they always did. Lucas, my younger brother, was draped. Across the couch, scrolling on his phone, the golden child bathed in approval. "Dad, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. I got in 3 schools. Westfield offered me a scholarship. My dad picked up the letter from Westfield, scanned it for half a second, then dropped it like it was junk mail. "A partial scholarship," he scoffed. "They obviously don't think much of you." I blinked. "But it's something." "I can work part-time, get loans," my mom cut in, sharp and cold. "No, this discussion is over. We're not wasting money on a fantasy. You'll work full-time after graduation and give us your check. You owe us. We raised you despite all your issues." All my issues. Like I was defective. Lucas, 12 at the time and already soaking in praise, looked up and grinned. "I'm gonna be a doctor like Dad. I'll go to college for both of us." My mom's face lit up like the 4th of July. What a noble thing to say, and just like that, my world shrank. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, stomach twisting. The next morning, my letters were in the trash, ripped neatly in half. That was when something snapped inside me. I stopped trying, but I didn't give up. For the next 3 years, I became a ghost in my own house. I worked at a pharmacy during the day. I transcribed medical notes at night. On weekends, I helped Mrs. Yamamoto at her health food store. She was one of the only people who ever looked me in the eye with kindness. They never asked where my paychecks came from. They just expected cash every Friday. So I gave them 80% of what I told them I made and hid the rest beneath a loose floorboard in my room. 20 here, 10 there. A few crumpled bills at a time. My secret freedom fund. Read medical textbooks gifted by Dr. Chen, a soft-spoken pediatrician who once worked at my dad's clinic. She'd seen the way I was treated but couldn't say much. Instead, she slipped me advanced material and whispered, "Knowledge is power, Nathan. They can't take it from you." At night, I snuck into the local university library. Nobody checked IDs if you walked in like you belonged. I'd spend hours devouring journals and research papers. That's where I met Victor Zhang, a chemistry student with a brutal sense of humor and a sharper brain than anyone I'd ever known. "You're not enrolled?" he said one night, narrowing his eyes at me over a pile of books. "Nope. What's your story?" And for some reason, I told him everything. He didn't pity me. He got mad. "They're sitting on a gold mine and treating it like a pile of dirt," he said. "Idiots." Victor became my first real friend. It all came to a head one Tuesday night. Lucas had thrown a tantrum. Something about needing silence to study for his prep school exams. I was sitting at the kitchen table reading one of Dr. Chun's textbooks. "He's distracting," Lucas complained, pointing at me like I was a bug. "His mediocrity is loud." Without missing a beat, my mom turned to me, face stone cold. "Go stay with a friend. Lucas needs to focus." "I don't have anywhere to go." "Figure it out," my dad said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "You're a man now. Stop being a burden." And just like that, I was out. One backpack, $50 in my wallet. They thought I'd come crawling back, but I didn't. I vanished. What they didn't know was that 3 months earlier, I'd signed a lease on a rundown studio apartment across town. Aunt Sophia, my dad's estranged sister, had helped as my guarantor. It was tiny. It smelled like mildew. The water pressure was laughable, but it was mine, and I was finally free. The first few weeks were brutal. I worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, lived on ramen and off-brand cereal. But every bite tasted like freedom. Then came the call that changed everything. It was Dr. Wilson, one of the old consultants at my father's clinic. Gruff, no nonsense, but kind underneath. "I heard what happened," he said. "Your parents are prize-winning fools. I need a research assistant. It's data cleaning and lab grunt work. But if you want it, it's yours." That job was a lifeline. Dr. Wilson let me stay late in the lab, running my own small experiments. On my first day, he gave me a pile of messy data and said, "Sort it." He expected it to take a week. I handed him a clean, color-coded report in 36 hours. He grunted. Not bad, that grunt. That was the first real validation I'd ever gotten. From an adult, Victor helped me apply to Westfield University. Dr. Wilson wrote the recommendation letter. My years of night reading finally paid off. I got in. I was a college student, older than everyone else, poorer than everyone else, but I didn't care. I wasn't there to party. I wasn't there to make friends. I was there to become someone. And then Emma. She was a guest lecturer, a medical resident with sharp eyes and a sharper brain. She challenged me, saw through me, believed in me. We talked for hours in a campus coffee shop about post-op nutrition and tissue repair. She wasn't just beautiful, she was brilliant, and she listened. When I told her my story, she didn't flinch. She looked me in the eye and said, "You took pain and turned it into purpose. That's power, Nathan." Her faith in me was the final spark, with Emma and Victor. I took my research and built NutriCore Medical in my tiny kitchen. A few years later, we were pitching to hospitals, getting funding, changing lives, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being the black sheep. I became the wolf. People talk about finding yourself like it's a peaceful, spiritual journey, long walks on the beach, journaling under sunsets, all that soul-searching nonsense, but for me, finding myself meant surviving on 3 hours of sleep, washing, my one good shirt in the sink, and eating stale crackers for dinner. Those first 3 years after I walked out of my parents' house weren't glamorous. They were raw, gritty, unfiltered survival mode, but they were mine. I had one goal: build a life so powerful that no one could ever make me feel small again. And that kind of life doesn't come gift-wrapped, it's earned, brick by brick, scar by scar. So I worked. God, did I work? During the day, I clocked in as a pharmacy assistant at a downtown drugstore. Not the kind of job you brag about, but it taught me things. How meds interact, how patients react, and how much chaos lives behind the counter of a quiet-looking pharmacy. At night, I did transcription medical dictation. Doctors rambling into recorders and me typing their half-coherent notes until my fingers ached. And weekends. I was back at Mrs. Yamamoto's shop. That woman, she was a quiet warrior. Probably the kindest soul I ever met. She never asked questions. She just handed me tea, gave me books on ancient herbs, and told me, "Balance isn't found, it's made." She didn't know it, but I clung to those words like a lifeline. Now, here's the part I never told anyone, not even Victor at first. I skimmed $20 from the pharmacy, 30 from transcription, maybe another 20 from Yamamoto's cash register. Not stealing, just quietly withholding what I never told my parents I made. I still gave them what they demanded, of course. 80% of the fake #1 reported every week. But the rest? That went under the loose floorboard in my apartment? Every crumpled dollar was a middle finger to the family, who'd tried to break me. But what really saved me wasn't money. It was the library. Not some inspirational, candle-scented bookstore kind of place. No, I'm talking about the University Library on 13th Street, the one I wasn't supposed to be in. The trick was simple: backpack, confidence, walk through the door like you belong. Nobody ever questioned it. Inside, it was quiet, freezing, and smelled like dust and ambition. I'd plant myself in a back corner and dive into medical journals, research papers, textbooks I couldn't afford to buy. I became obsessed with nutritional biochemistry, specifically how targeted nutrition could accelerate healing in trauma patients. I didn't know it then, but those long caffeine-fueled nights were laying the foundation for something huge. That's also where I met Victor Zhang. He had this permanent frown, like life had personally offended him. Skinny, brilliant, brutally honest. He spotted me one night, hunched over a paper on protein synthesis. "You're not in my program," he said bluntly, sliding into the seat across from me. "So what are you doing with that?" I looked up, expecting to be kicked out. "Just reading." He stared at me for a beat, then nodded slowly. "You're weird, I like it." And just like that, I had a friend. Victor didn't care about my baggage. In fact, when I finally told him the truth about my family, he got pissed. "Your parents are morons," he snapped. "They're sitting on a gold mine and treating it like scrap metal." He didn't offer pity. He offered partnership, mentorship, direction. When I came up with an early prototype for a post-surgery nutrition formula, he tore it apart, in the best way possible. This won't work, he said, pointing at my notes. But this could. He didn't just believe in me. He sharpened me. And then, one night, everything changed. Lucas, of course it had to be him. He was 15 by then, entitled, dramatic, and still there, precious golden boy. He was whining about prep school exams. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my nose buried in one of Dr. Chen's old textbooks. I can't study with him here, he wailed. His failure is distracting. Yep, my presence was now a vibe they couldn't handle. My mom didn't even blink. Go stay with a friend, Nathan. Lucas needs to focus. I don't have anywhere to go. Figure it out, my dad said, without even lowering his newspaper. You're a man now. Stop being a burden. That was it. No bags packed, no hugs, no goodbyes. They just kicked me out. But here's what they didn't know. I had already planned for that day 3 months earlier. With Aunt Sophia's help, I signed a lease on a crappy little studio apartment on the east side. They thought they broke me. I was already gone those first few weeks in my new place. Rough. The water was either boiling or freezing. The walls were so thin I could hear my neighbors sneeze. I slept on the floor using my hoodie as a pillow, but I was free, and every ramen noodle I slurped down tasted like rebellion. Then came a call I'll never forget. Dr. James Wilson, gruff old man, used to consult at my father's clinic. The only person there who ever treated me like I had a brain. I heard what happened, he said. Your parents are idiots. I've got a spot for a research assistant. You want it? I didn't hesitate. That job changed everything. Dr. Wilson didn't coddle. He challenged, he pushed. He let me stay late and use the lab for my own experiments. On one condition, don't waste my time. On my first day, he gave me a chaotic pile of data from a failed experiment. Clean this up. I don't care how long it takes. It took me 36 hours. I didn't sleep. I handed him a color-coded, cross-referenced report. He grunted. Huh, maybe you're not useless after all. High praise from him. With Wilson's recommendation and Victor's help navigating admissions, I finally got into Westfield University officially. Legally, on paper, I was 21. Everyone else was 18 and still figuring out how to make mac and cheese. I wasn't there for dorm parties. I was there to build a life. And every lecture, every exam, every sleepless night was one more step away from being defective, Nathan. And that's when Emma walked in, a guest lecturer, a med resident, smart, graceful, and terrifying in the way she saw straight through you. She challenged me from day one. After class, she'd corner me with that formula you mentioned. Explain it, no fluff. I loved it. We ended up talking for hours in this tiny coffee shop off campus. I showed her my sketches, concepts for nutrient blends that could aid post-op recovery. She didn't just listen, she added, improved that night. I think I fell in love not just with her, but with the idea that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't broken. When I told her my story, she didn't blink. Most people would have been crushed by that, she said. But you turned it into fuel. That's not survival, Nathan. That's power. That moment rewired something in me, because she didn't just believe in my ideas. She believed in me with her support and Victor's brilliance. We launched Nutricore Medical out of my tiny kitchen. No investors, no safety net, just grit, coffee, and midnight arguments about amino acid chains. I didn't have a rich dad. I didn't have a famous name. But I had fire and purpose, and slowly the world started noticing. Funny how life circles back, isn't it? And the next, you're standing under a glittering chandelier, wearing a tailored tuxedo. That costs more than your old car. Sipping champagne next to billionaires, and then you're that voice, the one that used to haunt you in your sleep? Nathan Cole. I turned slowly, already knowing what I'd find. Lucas, of course. He hadn't changed a bit. Still had that toothpaste commercial smile, the carefully mussed hair, the tailored suit that screamed, "Daddy still pays my bills." He sauntered up like he owned the room, flashing that arrogant smirk I used to dream of knocking off his face. Well, he said, his voice loud enough to draw attention. Look what the cat dragged in. Shouldn't you be in the kitchen or something? Big bro. These events don't usually have valet parking for the waitstaff. I could feel the eyes turning, dozens of them. People who measured worth by bloodlines and last names. I just smiled, calm and cool. The world's a small place, Lucas, I said. And I'm here for a very different reason than you are. He blinked, confused for a second. Then came the backup. My parents. My mother's voice cut through the ambient jazz like a blade. Richard. Look at him. She didn't say my name. Just him. Like I was some stain on the marble. He's ruining the air in here just by breathing. She hissed, her voice still full of that icy disgust she'd always reserved. For me, my father barely gave me a glance. He's probably working catering, he muttered. Just ignore him. Classic. But they weren't the only ones walking up. Two new people joined the awkward little circle that was forming. Lucas's fiancé, a sleek-looking guy in a lab coat turned suit named Dr. Ronald Allen, and beside him, a sharp-eyed woman I recognized immediately, Dr. Patricia Lawson, chief of medicine at University Hospital, Dr. Allen's boss. She looked at me with polite curiosity. He, however, looked like he'd just seen a ghost. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just gave him the smallest nod of recognition. I wanted him to feel it. That slow, creeping horror of, oh no, I know exactly who this is, because Ronald Allen had no idea that the man he once tried to sabotage was now one of the key sponsors of the very hospital where he worked. And tonight was the beginning of the end for him. Emma appeared beside, was enough to make my mother's face twist into something acidic. Emma slipped her hand into mine, squeezing gently. You okay? She whispered, her eyes searching mine. We can leave right now. Say the word, Nathan, and we're out of here. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I realized I had someone who would burn the world down if it meant protecting me. I squeezed back. No, I said, I'm not running anymore. My mother saw the exchange, of course. He found someone to latch onto. Some poor girl who fell for a sob story? I flinched. Not because it wasn't true, but because she still knew exactly where to strike. Defective, she muttered. Always was. And just like that, I was 10 years old again. Standing in the cold, musty shed, the air thick with gasoline and mold, listening to spiders crawl, trying not to cry, trying to prove I could be fixed, but I wasn't 10 anymore. I was 32, and I had built an empire while they rotted in their echo chamber of cruelty. Lucas, emboldened by the silence, leaned in close. Still nothing to say, he asked, cocky. Cat got your tongue, Nate. My father chuckled. He never did have much upstairs, didn't even finish college. That was when I felt the shift. The old me, the broken, timid version, would have just taken it. Let the moment pass, but not anymore, because I had the one thing they never expected. Power. Not just money, not just success. Met each of their eyes, one by one. Some people spend their lives stepping on others to feel taller, I said calmly. But you can't step on someone who's already flying. Lucas laughed. A little too loud, a little too fake. You think you're flying now? He sneered. Let's see how long that lasts. Wedding crashers usually aren't, my mother added with a smirk. I didn't respond. Not yet. But Emma gave Lucas a cool, assessing glance. Then, with grace only she could pull off, she extended a hand, not to him but to his fiancé, Dr. Allen, she said smoothly. Emma Blackwell Ford. Lovely to finally meet you. There it was, Blackwell. A name, so powerful, so revered, that the mere mention changed the air around us. I saw it hit my parents like a wave. Confusion first, then suspicion, then the slow, dawning horror that maybe, just maybe, they'd miscalculated everything. Still, my father puffed out his chest. Well, Dr. Allen here just won a very prestigious award, he said proudly. A rising star, one of the top young surgeons in the country? I nodded. Double quotes. Yes, I said, my voice calm. I'm very familiar with his work. Ronald paled, because he remembered the pitch meeting. The one where he'd tried to tank our proposal. The one where he'd stolen our idea and tried to pass it off as his own. And he remembered me sitting at the end of the table, silently taking notes. The hunter was about to realize he'd stepped into a trap. The gala host returned to the stage, tapping the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, please find your seats for the keynote address and our Visionary in Medicine Award presentation. A hush swept the room, and then Emma leaned toward me again, her voice low and amused. Guess who's giving the keynote, she said with a smirk. Dad, I blinked. You mean, yep, she nodded. Dr. Jonathan Blackwell, my father, the man they all worship. Lucas's eyes widened. My mother's lips parted. My father looked like someone had unplugged his brain, because the one man who was about to take the stage, the man they admired, envied, and bowed to, was my father-in-law, and they had absolutely no idea. I watched their faces as the spotlight hit the podium, watched the blood drain from Ronald Allen's cheeks, watched Lucas freeze, watched my mother blink in confusion, and I smiled, because what they didn't know yet was this. The trap wasn't the ballroom. It wasn't Emma. It wasn't the gala. The trap was me. The house lights dimmed. The soft hum of polite conversation quieted into reverent silence. At the center of the grand ballroom, a single spotlight beamed down on the stage as the host introduced the keynote speaker. I could already feel the anticipation radiating from the audience. Everyone knew the name, Dr. Jonathan Blackwell, the medical legend, the philanthropist. the man whose name adorned hospitals, labs, and scholarships across the country. But for me, he was more than a name. He was family. Emma leaned in and whispered again, her voice a warm current in my ear. "This is it," she said. "The moment everything changes." Dr. Blackwell strode onto the stage with effortless authority, dressed in a crisp black tuxedo, his silver hair gleaming under the lights. There was no pretense in him, no affectation, just calm assurance, the kind of presence that demanded attention without ever asking for it. He stepped up to the podium, adjusted the mic slightly, and looked out into the sea of faces. "Good evening," he began, his voice rich and steady. "Tonight, we're here to celebrate innovation, resilience, and vision." People sat forward in their seats. Phones were tucked away, champagne glasses lowered to the linen-covered tables. We're in a time when medicine needs more than tradition. We need disruption. We need leaders who've walked through fire and come out forged, not broken. Men and women who challenge our thinking and push boundaries. People who, against all odds, have built something extraordinary from the ashes of adversity. My heart thudded in my chest. This was it. The walls that had stood between my past and present were about to come crashing down. My parents still hadn't pieced it together. They sat at the next table over, nodding along like the faithful audience. Members they pretended to be. Lucas leaned over to Ronald Allen and whispered something. Allen, now visibly sweating, didn't reply. His eyes were locked on Dr. Blackwell, his jaw tight, his grip on his award growing increasingly tense. Dr. Blackwell continued. "Tonight, the Blackwell Foundation is proud to honor an individual whose personal and professional journey exemplifies everything we stand for. He's someone who didn't inherit privilege. He earned every single inch of ground he stands on." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. My mother leaned in toward my father. "I wonder who it is," she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "Probably some Vonderkin from Europe, or one of those prodigies from Blackwell General." She was smiling, still secure, still blind. "His company, Nutricore Medical, has changed the way hospitals approach post-operative recovery," Dr. Blackwell went on. "They've pioneered nutritional protocols now being implemented in over 300 hospitals across the nation. They've reduced patient recovery time, lowered readmission rates, and are saving countless lives in the process." Dr. Lawson, sitting a few tables down, raised her eyebrows slightly. She knew she was one of the first major supporters of our work. She had been with us during the earliest trial runs. I saw her glance toward Allen, then back at Dr. Blackwell with a flicker of knowing curiosity. This individual did not follow the path others carved for him. Blackwell continued. In fact, he was actively denied those paths, told he wasn't enough, that he was, in his own family's words, defective. The air changed right then, like a breeze had swept through the ballroom and taken everyone's breath with it. Lucas shifted. My mother stiffened. My father lowered his glass. He was told to keep quiet, told to stay small, told to be grateful for scraps, but he didn't listen. Instead, he learned, he worked, he studied in secret. He built something lasting, not in spite of the cruelty he endured, but because of it. Dr. Blackwell's eyes scanned the room, and then he smiled. A warm, unmistakably proud smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "please join me in honoring the Blackwell Foundation's visionary in medicine, my son-in-law and CEO of Nutricore Medical, Mr. Nathan Cole." There was a moment. 1-2 seconds of frozen, stunned silence, and then the applause erupted. It was thunderous, rising like a tidal wave and crashing through the stunned expressions of my past. Emma stood and gently nudged me to my feet. Her eyes glistened, full of pride and love. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "Go show them who you are." As I walked toward the stage, every step felt like breaking free from another chain. Like I was reclaiming something stolen. My mother's mouth hung open, eyes wide in pure disbelief. My father looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. Lucas just stared, caught between shock and some twisted form of recognition. And Allen, poor Allen, his face was a sickly shade of gray. The applause followed me all the way to the stage. When I shook Jonathan's hand at the podium, he pulled me into a hug and whispered in my ear, "I'm proud of you, son." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. I stood at the mic and took a deep breath. My palms were steady. My voice didn't shake. "I wasn't supposed to be here," I began, my voice clear and even. "Not just here tonight, here at all. I was told I didn't have what it takes, that I wasn't smart enough, that I wasn't worth the effort." I looked out into the crowd directly at my parents' table, but I learned something early on. I continued. "You don't need permission to build a future. You don't need validation from the people who can't see your worth. You just need a spark, a belief, a sliver of hope that grows into purpose." Emma was standing now, her hands clasped in front of her. Her father stood beside her. Behind them, Dr. Chen caught my eye, her small nod anchoring me again to everything I'd once fought for. I spent years being the shadow in someone else's spotlight, I said. And then one day I realized I could build my own. And now, that light is saving lives. There were murmurs of approval, nods, even tears in some eyes. But I wasn't done. I want to thank the people who helped me get here. My mentor, Dr. James Wilson, my first friend and business partner, Victor Jang, my incredible wife, Emma, whose brilliance humbles me every single day, and who showed me what real family looks like. Another round of applause. Louder this time. And then I said it. And lastly, to the people who once called me defective, thank you. The room went completely silent. My eyes didn't move from my parents' faces. Thank you for the fuel. Thank you for the doubt. Thank you for underestimating me, I said. Because your rejection was the push I needed to find a family who sees me, a purpose that drives me, and a legacy I'm proud to build. It was done. I stepped back as the room rose to its feet. A standing ovation thundered through the ballroom. Even Dr. Lawson was clapping, and my family, they were statues, shocked, speechless, exactly as I'd always dreamed. After the event, people swarmed. Congratulations, handshakes, business cards. Emma never left my side, her hand in mine, her smile radiant. My parents tried to approach. Eventually, Lucas led the charge. Hey, Nathan, he began, his voice uncertain now. Wow, you really surprised us. I turned to him slowly, calmly, surprised or exposed. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. My mother stepped forward. Nathan, she said carefully, perhaps we were mistaken. About you, I looked at her and saw not regret but calculation. She wasn't sorry. She was repositioning. I'm not here for reconciliation, I said flatly. I'm here because I earned this in spite of you. My father, face red and jaw clenched, muttered something under his breath. I leaned in. You told me I'd never amount to anything, I whispered. But here we are. I built everything you wanted, and I didn't need you to do it. Then I turned and walked away, Emma beside me, hand in mine, leaving their stunned silence behind me like ash in the wind. The night after the gala, Emma and I sat on the balcony of our penthouse suite. The city skyline, glittering like a galaxy, sprawled across the horizon. The cool air carried the faint hum of distant traffic, but up here it felt like we were floating. Alone, suspended above the world we had fought so hard to reach. Emma leaned her head on my shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. You did it. I didn't answer right away. I just sat there watching the stars flicker above the skyline, wondering how I'd gone from being a boy locked in a storage shed to a man celebrated by some of the greatest minds in medicine. Not just celebrated, respected. And not just respected, seen. For most of my life, I had thought survival was the goal. Get through the day, endure the words, dodge the blows, verbal and otherwise. I never allowed myself to dream too far ahead because every time I did, someone in my family would snuff that flame out with a reminder. You're not like Lucas. You're not built for success. But here I was, and they'd seen it with their own eyes. They didn't come back into the ballroom after that speech, Emma said, sitting up to face me. Your mom, your dad, Lucas, they just disappeared. They didn't know how to face me after that, I said with a shrug. They only recognize people when they're beneath them. Anything else confuses them. Emma studied me, her eyes full of something deeper than admiration, something gentler. How do you feel now? After everything, I didn't have to think. Long, lighter, I said. Like I finally let go of a backpack full of bricks I didn't even realize I was still carrying. She smiled. You didn't just let it go, Nathan. You dropped it right in the middle of a chandelier-lit ballroom in front of 1,000 people. I chuckled, resting my head against hers. That was never the plan, but I guess it was always inevitable. We sat like that for a while, watching the world from above. I had everything now, Emma. Our son Oliver, a company that was making real change, a life built from the wreckage they left me in. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for it to all be taken away. I wasn't waiting for the shoe to drop, or the door to slam shut again. I had built the door, and I had locked it behind me. A few days after the gala, I received an email from my mother. Just a subject line. Let's talk. No greeting, no apology. Just 3 words. I stared at it. For a long time, part of me, the small, tired part that still wanted to be seen by the people who raised me, wanted to respond. Wanted to believe maybe this time would be different. But the larger part of me, the healed part, the grown man who had made peace with his own value, knew better. I didn't respond. A week later, Lucas called. It went to voicemail. Hey Nate, he said. Like the word tasted strange. Look, I get it. You're mad. I'd be too. But Mom and Dad, they're not doing great. They're really shaken. I think you should come by, talk it through. Maybe we can all just start over. Start over. I almost laughed out loud. Start over. Like what? Like the last 2 decades didn't happen? Like he hadn't helped destroy me piece by piece, then acted like I never existed unless it served his ego? No, there would be no reset button. No carefully curated family dinner where everything got swept under a rug thick with years of contempt. Deleted the voicemail and blocked the number. The past was done knocking. I had changed the locks. The months that followed were some of the best of my life. Nutricore expanded into international markets. Emma launched a new research division at Blackwell General, and I got to spend my mornings taking Oliver to preschool and my nights helping him build Lego towers that reached the ceiling. I found joy in the small things. The way Oliver's eyes lit up when I walked into the room, the way Emma hummed when she cooked, the way I could finally sleep without waking up in a cold, sweat from dreams of my mother's voice whispering defective. The silence in my life now was peaceful. Not the kind of silence that follows punishment, but the kind that means freedom. Victor and I stayed close. He often joked, "Man, if your parents hadn't treated you like trash, we'd both still be stuck pushing carts in a pharmacy." "Pain makes strange fertilizer," I always replied. But damn, did it grow something strong? Every now and then, Dr. Chen would send me a postcard. She'd retired finally and was traveling through Asia. Her notes were short but powerful. "Still proud of you. Never stop proving them wrong." Or, "You made it, Nathan. You were never defective, just too rare for a small world." I framed every single one. Then one afternoon, several months after the gala, I got a letter in the mail. It was handwritten. The envelope scrawled in neat cursive, from Aunt Sophia. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly a decade. Not since she helped me get that apartment and then disappeared again. Into her quiet little life by the sea. The letter was short, but every word rang loud in my chest. "Dear Nathan, I watched the gala online. Watched you stand on that stage and say the words I never could. You said them not just for yourself, but for every one of us who was cast out for not being what they wanted. You were brave. You were brilliant. You broke the chain. I am so proud of you. Love always, Sophia." That night, I cried for the first time in years. Not from pain, not from anger, but from relief, gratitude. I hadn't just survived my family. I had transformed because of them. And that transformation had created something new, something that gave others the courage to speak, to walk away, to rebuild. Eventually, word reached me through a distant cousin that my parents had downsized, sold the house I grew up in. Lucas's career had plateaued after a quiet internal review exposed discrepancies in his published research. Courtesy of Dr. Lawson and a whistleblower in her department, Ronald Allen had been quietly dismissed from University Hospital months earlier. None of it made me happy. Exactly, but it made me feel resolved. The chapter had closed, the past had taken its shot, and I had turned the impact into a legacy. One evening, as Emma and I tucked Oliver into bed, he looked up at me with his sleepy, curious eyes and asked, "Daddy, who taught you how to be a daddy?" The question stunned me. For a moment, I was back in that kitchen, 10 years old, locked in a storage shed, unlovely, defective, alone. But then, I was here again, kneeling next to my son's bed, his tiny hand in mine, my wife beside me, her love constant and unwavering, and I smiled. "No one," I said softly, "but I learned by doing the opposite of everything I was taught." He nodded like that made perfect sense and drifted off to sleep. As I turned out the light and closed the door, I realized something simple, but profound. The revenge had never really been about revenge. It had been about reclaiming a life they tried to steal, and now I was finally living it. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more of these stories.